My boss Kevin Patterson just fired me for slacking off, while sitting directly beneath a wall displaying my 4 record-breaking deals worth over $15 million, deals that had made company history just last month. What he didn't realize as he slid those termination papers across his desk was that he'd just made the most catastrophic mistake of his career, and I was about to watch his entire world crumble. My name is Marcus Williams, and I've been the top account executive at Pinnacle Solutions for 3 years running. Just last month, I closed 4 deals that broke every company record we had: Morrison Industries for $2.8 million, Blackstone Group for $3.2 million, Henderson Manufacturing for $4.1 million, and the biggest prize of all, Atlantic Enterprises signing a 2-year contract worth $5.5 million. These weren't just numbers on paper. Each deal took months of relationship building, countless client dinners, and earning trust one handshake at a time. Kevin Patterson had been my boss for only 6 months, brought in from outside by CEO Robert Sterling to shake things up in the sales department. Kevin wore expensive suits and spoke in corporate buzzwords, but he'd never once joined me on a client call or helped close a single deal. Instead, he spent his time in meetings with people I'd never seen before, always shutting his office door when I walked by. That Tuesday morning started like any other until Janet Rodriguez, my assistant, knocked on my cubicle with an unusual expression. "Kevin wants to see you in his office," she said, her voice quieter than normal. "He asked me to clear your schedule for the rest of the day." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. I'd been in sales long enough to recognize when the air in a building shifted, and this felt different. Walking into Kevin's corner office, I immediately noticed he'd removed the client appreciation gifts from his shelves, the crystal paperweight from Morrison Industries, the signed baseball from Henderson Manufacturing's CEO, who was a huge Yankees fan. Behind his desk hung our department's Wall of Champions, displaying the biggest deals of the quarter. All 4 of my record-breaking contracts were prominently featured, my signature visible on each one. "Marcus, have a seat," Kevin said without looking up from his computer screen. "We need to discuss your recent performance." He slid a manila folder across his polished mahogany desk. Inside were termination papers with my name already typed in. "Your work has been inconsistent lately. The company needs people who are hungry, not coasting on past success." I stared at the documents, then at the wall behind him showcasing my achievements. "Kevin, I literally just brought in $15.6 million in new business last month. That's more than the rest of the team combined." He leaned back in his leather chair with a thin smile. "It's not about the numbers, Marcus. It's about your attitude and resistance to team integration." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Team integration. I'd heard him use that phrase in hushed phone conversations, always followed by mentions of streamlining processes and reducing key person risk. Suddenly, those closed-door meetings with strangers started making sense. "This is about control, isn't it?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "You want to break up my client relationships and distribute them to junior reps who'll follow your corporate playbook." Kevin's expression hardened. "This conversation is over, Marcus. Security will escort you out in 30 minutes. As I walked back to my desk to pack my things, I noticed something that Kevin had apparently missed during his months of plotting against me. Every business card in my Rolodex contained personal cell phone numbers, not just office extensions. Every client relationship I'd built over 3 years was based on trust in me personally, not loyalty to Pinnacle Solutions. Kevin had assumed that firing me would simply transfer my accounts to other salespeople, but he'd never bothered to understand how business actually worked in our industry. I packed my personal items into a cardboard box while other employees pretended not to stare. The Crystal Award from last year's sales conference, family photos, and most importantly, my personal contact database that I'd maintained separately from the company system. Janet approached my desk with tears in her eyes. "Marcus, this doesn't make sense. You're the best salesperson we have. Sometimes the best employee isn't what management wants, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm for her sake. They want predictable, controllable, and replaceable. As I spoke, my phone buzzed with a text message from Daniel Morrison, CEO of Morrison Industries. Heard through the grapevine that something's happening at your office. Everything okay? The business community in Charlotte was tighter than most people realized. Word traveled fast when major changes happened at successful companies, especially when those changes involved their top performers. I quickly typed back, "We'll call you later today to explain." Within minutes, similar messages arrived from Jennifer Blackstone, Thomas Henderson, and Catherine Walsh at Atlantic Enterprises. Walking toward the elevator with my box, I passed Kevin's office where he was already on the phone with someone, gesturing excitedly while looking at what appeared to be client files spread across his desk. Through the glass wall, I could see him pointing at my former accounts like a general planning his next campaign. He had no idea that he was about to discover the difference between owning contracts and maintaining relationship. The elevator ride down felt like the longest 30 seconds of my life. Not because I was sad or scared, but because I was starting to understand the massive mistake Kevin had just made. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for a moment and made a decision that would prove to be the beginning of his downfall. I pulled out my phone and called Richard Dalton, CEO of Summit Strategic Group, who had been trying to recruit me for 2 years. "Richard, it's Marcus Williams. Remember that offer you made me last Christmas? Is it still on the table?" His response was immediate. "Marcus, what happened?" And yes, absolutely. "When can you start?" As I drove home, my phone continued buzzing with messages from clients who'd heard news of my departure through industry contact. Each message confirmed what Kevin had failed to grasp. They hadn't signed with Pinnacle Solutions because of the company's reputation or corporate structure. They'd signed because they trusted me personally to deliver results and solve their problems. That evening, I sat in my home office and did something that would make Kevin's worst nightmare come true. I started returning phone calls to clients who deserved to know the truth about what had happened to their account manager. What I discovered during those conversations would expose the real reason behind my termination. My phone rang at 7 in the morning, less than 12 hours after Kevin had fired me. Daniel Morrison's voice was tight with concern. "Marcus, I just got off a conference call with your former boss. He's telling me that you've been transitioned out, and that someone named Brad Jenkins will be handling our account moving forward." I nearly choked on my coffee. Brad was a junior sales rep who'd been with the company for 8 months and had never closed a deal over $50,000. "Daniel, I need to be completely honest with you," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I was terminated yesterday for what Kevin called performance issues, despite closing those 4 record deals last month." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice had shifted from concern to anger. "Performance issues? Marcus, you personally saved us $400,000 during our contract negotiation. This makes 0 sense. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing constantly. Jennifer Blackstone from the Blackstone Group called next. "Marcus, we just received a formal letter from Pinnacle introducing our new account manager, someone named Sarah Thompson." "Who is this person?" Sarah was another junior rep who'd started 3 weeks ago. "Jennifer, I can't tell you how to run your business, but I can tell you that I'm no longer with Pinnacle as of yesterday." The pattern continued throughout the day. Thomas Henderson called about his new account manager, some kid named Mike Rodriguez who'd apparently sent him an email full of spelling mistakes. Catherine Walsh from Atlantic Enterprises was furious that Kevin himself had called to reassure her about the transition, then couldn't answer basic questions about their implementation timeline. By noon, I'd received calls from all 4 of my major clients expressing the same sentiment: they'd signed with Pinnacle because of me, not despite me. Each conversation was professional and factual, but the message was clear. They felt betrayed by a company that would fire their trusted representative without warning. That afternoon, Richard Dalton and I met at Summit Strategic Group's downtown office. The contrast with Pinnacle was immediate. Where Kevin's office was all glass and chrome, Richard's space felt warm and genuine, with family photos and client appreciation letters covering his walls. "Marcus, I've been waiting 2 years for this opportunity," he said, sliding a contract across his wooden desk. "Vice President of Client Relations, Equity Partnership Track, and complete autonomy over your portfolio." The offer was better than anything Pinnacle had ever provided, but more importantly, it came with respect. "Richard, I need you to understand something," I said. "If I accept this position, there's a good chance several major accounts will follow me from my previous employer. I want to be completely transparent about that possibility." Richard smiled. "Marcus, that's exactly why I want you here. In this business, trust follows people, not company logos." I signed the contract that evening, but what happened next would expose the real reason Kevin had been so eager to get rid of me. The truth was far worse than simple corporate incompetence. Wednesday morning brought the first domino falling. Daniel Morrison's assistant called Pinnacle to formally terminate their contract, citing fundamental changes in account management that no longer meet our service expectations. Jennifer Blackstone's company followed 2 hours later. By lunch, Thomas Henderson had sent a certified letter ending their relationship effective immediately. Catherine Walsh waited until the afternoon to deliver the final blow. Atlantic Enterprises was canceling their massive 2-year contract and demanding a full refund of their initial payment. Kevin called me directly at 4:15, his voice strained and desperate. "Marcus, we need to talk. These clients are making unreasonable demands based on misinformation." I kept my response calm and professional. "Kevin, I'm no longer a Pinnacle employee. Any client concerns should be directed to your current team." The panic in his voice was unmistakable. "Robert Sterling wants to meet with you personally. We can work out a consulting arrangement." "I appreciate the offer, but I've already accepted a position elsewhere," I replied. Kevin's tone shifted from desperation to anger. "You can't just steal our clients, Marcus. We have legal protections in place." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Kevin, I haven't contacted a single client to recruit them. They're making their own business decisions based on their experience with your new account management structure." That evening, Janet Rodriguez called my personal number. "Marcus, it's complete chaos here. Kevin's been in emergency meetings all day with Robert Sterling and some lawyers. They're saying you violated your employment agreement." I assured Janet that my attorney had already reviewed everything and that I was fully protected. "But Janet, can I ask you something? Has Kevin had any meetings recently with people from outside the company? Maybe consultants or advisors?" Her answer revealed the missing piece of the puzzle. "Oh yes, there's been this group coming in every few weeks for the past 2 months. They always meet in the executive conference room with Kevin and Robert." Janet mentioned they ask lots of questions about client relationships and revenue sources. The company name on their business cards was Meridian Capital. Everything clicked into place. Meridian Capital was a private equity firm known for buying successful companies, stripping out costs, and flipping them for profit. They'd clearly been conducting due diligence on Pinnacle, and my personal relationships with major clients represented what they called key person risk. Kevin hadn't fired me because of performance issues. He'd eliminated me to make the company more attractive for acquisition. Thursday brought validation in the form of a phone call from Patricia Hayes, the employment attorney I'd consulted. "Marcus, Pinnacle's legal team contacted me this morning with threats about client interference. I informed them that since you were terminated for cause, your non-compete clause is unenforceable, and you have every right to accept business from clients who seek you out voluntarily." The industry publication, Southern Business Weekly, ran a story that Friday morning. "Major corporate accounts follow star salesperson to competitor." The article detailed how Summit Strategic had gained over $15 million in new business contracts in a single week, while Pinnacle Solutions faced its largest quarterly loss in company history. The reporter had interviewed several of my former clients, and their quotes were devastating for Kevin's reputation. Working with Marcus Williams wasn't just about sales, Daniel Morrison was quoted as saying. He understood our business and solved our problems. When Pinnacle told us a junior employee would take over, it felt like they didn't value our relationship at all. Jennifer Blackstone added, any company that fires their top performer clearly doesn't understand what makes clients loyal. By Friday afternoon, I was settled into my new corner office at Summit Strategic, complete with a view of Charlotte's skyline and something I'd never had at Pinnacle, a team of support staff dedicated to helping me succeed rather than undermining my efforts. Richard Dalton stopped by with coffee and a smile. Marcus, we've had 6 other companies call today asking if we're accepting new clients. Word is spreading that you're here. As I organized my new workspace, my phone buzzed with a text from Robert Sterling himself. Marcus, we need to discuss this situation immediately. Kevin may have acted hastily. There might be room for negotiation. I showed the message to Richard, who laughed out loud. Too little, too late. They had 3 years to appreciate what you brought to their company. But the real shock was still coming, and it would expose just how deep Kevin's deception had gone. 3 weeks into my new role at Summit Strategic, Daniel Morrison invited me to dinner at the exclusive Charlotte Country Club to discuss expanding our contract. What he told me over steak and wine would blow the lid off Kevin's entire scheme. Marcus, I need to share something that's been bothering me since you left Pinnacle, Daniel said, lowering his voice despite the private dining room. About 2 months ago, Kevin brought in this consultant named James Mitchell from Meridian Capital. Said he was conducting an industry analysis. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. What kind of analysis? Daniel continued. Mitchell asked detailed questions about our relationship with you specifically. How dependent we were on your personal involvement, whether we'd stay with Pinnacle if you left, what it would take to transition us to a different account manager. At the time, I thought it was just standard business planning. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Kevin hadn't just fired me on a whim. He'd been systematically preparing my clients for my removal as part of Meridian Capital's acquisition strategy. Daniel, did Mitchell meet with any of my other clients? His nod confirmed my worst suspicions. Jennifer Blackstone mentioned the same guy visited them. Thomas Henderson too. We compared notes after your termination. I excused myself and called Patricia Hayes immediately. Patricia, I need you to investigate Meridian Capital's involvement with Pinnacle Solutions. I think my termination was part of a planned acquisition strategy. Her response was swift and professional. Marcus, if that's true, we're looking at potential fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. I'll start digging immediately. The next morning brought a surprise visit from Janet Rodriguez, who'd driven to Summit Strategic during her lunch break. Marcus, I couldn't say this over the phone, but I've been Kevin's assistant for 6 months and I know something's not right. She pulled out her phone and showed me photos she'd discreetly taken of documents left on Kevin's desk. These are emails between Kevin and someone at Meridian Capital discussing client portfolio optimization and key person risk mitigation. The emails were damning. One message from Kevin read, Williams termination scheduled for Tuesday. All major accounts have been pre-qualified for transition. Junior staff assignments already prepared. Another email from Meridian's James Mitchell replied, Excellent work. The board will be pleased with the reduced dependency risk. Acquisition timeline remains on track for Q4. Janet, why are you showing me this? I asked, genuinely moved by her courage. Because it's wrong, Marcus. You made this company millions of dollars, and they threw you away like garbage for some corporate deal. Plus, Kevin's already talking about firing more senior staff to optimize operations for the new owners. That afternoon, I shared Janet's evidence with Patricia Hayes, who immediately filed a complaint with the North Carolina Department of Labor alleging wrongful termination and corporate fraud. "Marcus, this is bigger than your individual case," she explained. "If we can prove Kevin systematically removed experienced employees to make the company more attractive for acquisition, other employees may have claims too." Word of the investigation spread quickly through Charlotte's business community. By Friday, the Southern Business Weekly had picked up the story. "Fired salesman's wrongful termination claim exposes alleged corporate fraud." The article detailed how Pinnacle's top performer had been deliberately eliminated to facilitate a private equity acquisition, despite generating record profits. Meanwhile, Summit Strategic continued gaining momentum. Richard Dalton announced that we'd signed 8 new clients in 3 weeks, generating over $28 million in new business. My former competitors were calling to congratulate me, while headhunters from other firms started circling like sharks smelling blood in the water. Kevin made one final desperate attempt to contact me personally, showing up at Summit Strategic's lobby on a Friday evening. Security called upstairs, and I agreed to meet him in the conference room with Richard present as a witness. Kevin looked haggard, his expensive suit wrinkled and his confident demeanor completely gone. "Marcus, this has gotten out of hand," he pleaded. "The legal issues, the media attention, it's hurting everyone. Robert Sterling authorized me to offer you a senior vice president position with full client autonomy. We can make this whole situation disappear." I studied his face, seeing desperation where arrogance used to live. "Kevin, 3 weeks ago you fired me for slacking off, while sitting under a wall displaying my record-breaking achievements. Now you're offering me a promotion." I kept my voice calm and professional. "What's really happening is that Meridian Capital pulled their acquisition offer when they realized you destroyed the very relationships they wanted to buy." His face went pale, confirming my suspicions. The acquisition deal had collapsed, leaving Pinnacle without the exit strategy they'd planned and without the revenue my accounts had generated. Kevin had gambled everything on a corporate transaction and lost spectacularly. But the final revelation was still coming, and it would prove that karma has perfect timing. 6 months after Kevin fired me for slacking off, I stood in Summit Strategic's largest conference room as Richard Dalton announced my promotion to Executive Vice President and full equity partner. The numbers on the presentation screen told an incredible story: $42 million in new business, with my portfolio accounting for $35 million of that total. Not only had all my original clients followed me, but word of mouth had brought in 12 additional major accounts from companies that wanted to work with someone who put relationships before corporate politics. The local business journal had featured me on their cover as Executive of the Year, with a story titled "How Personal Integrity Beats Corporate Strategy." The article interviewed several clients who praised my approach to business and criticized Pinnacle's handling of the transition. Daniel Morrison was quoted saying, "Marcus didn't just manage our account. He became a trusted advisor who understood our business better than we did sometimes." That same morning brought news that would complete Kevin's downfall. Janet Rodriguez, who'd left Pinnacle to become my executive assistant at Summit, handed me a newspaper with devastating headlines: "Pinnacle Solutions files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy." The company that had fired their top performer for alleged poor performance had collapsed within 8 months, unable to survive the loss of their major accounts and the failed Meridian Capital acquisition. The bankruptcy filing revealed the full scope of Kevin's deception. Court documents showed that Pinnacle had borrowed heavily against expected acquisition proceeds from Meridian Capital. When the deal fell through after losing my client portfolio, they couldn't service their debt. Kevin had mortgaged the company's future on a transaction that required destroying the relationships that made the company valuable in the first place. Robert Sterling held a press conference that afternoon, looking tired and defeated. "We made strategic errors in personnel management that resulted in significant client losses," he admitted to reporters. The board takes full responsibility for decisions that ultimately led to this outcome. Kevin Patterson was noticeably absent from the press conference. Industry sources reported he'd been terminated and was facing personal lawsuits from investors who'd lost money in the failed acquisition. My phone rang during the press conference. It was Patricia Hayes with news that would provide the final piece of justice. Marcus, the Department of Labor investigation, found evidence of systematic wrongful termination at Pinnacle. Kevin fired 6 senior employees over 8 months, all to reduce key person risk for the Meridian acquisition. The state is filing criminal fraud charges. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Robert Sterling himself. His voice was hollow and defeated. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. Kevin convinced me that your independence was a liability, but he was wrong about everything. The company you helped build is gone, and it's my fault for trusting the wrong person." I listened respectfully, feeling no satisfaction in his misery. "Robert, I appreciate the call. I hope you land on your feet." There was no point in anger or gloating. The market had delivered its own justice more effectively than any revenge I could have planned. The final irony came a week later when Meridian Capital's James Mitchell called Summit Strategic directly, asking if we were interested in selling our company. "Mr. Williams, we're impressed with your growth trajectory and client loyalty metrics," he said during our phone call. "Your approach to relationship management is exactly what we look for in acquisition targets." I politely declined, explaining that Summit Strategic wasn't for sale. After hanging up, I couldn't help but smile at the cosmic justice of it all. The same private equity firm that had orchestrated my firing was now trying to buy the company I'd helped build from scratch. 6 months later, I signed the final documents making me a full partner at Summit Strategic. The firm had grown 60% since my arrival, and my client portfolio now represented over $50 million in annual revenue. I'd hired 4 new account managers, all with the same profit-sharing structure I'd negotiated for myself. No one would build something here only to have it stolen by corporate politics. As I sat in my corner office, looking out at Charlotte's skyline, I reflected on the lesson learned. In business, trust and relationships aren't just nice-to-have extras, they're the foundation everything else is built on. When companies forget that and treat people like replaceable parts in a machine, the market has a way of delivering harsh reminders. Sometimes the best revenge isn't plotting against those who wronged you. It's simply being so successful that their mistake becomes impossible to ignore, while building something better than what they destroyed.